We immediately see when Letitia and her sister Ruby and some of her artist friends move into the house that they are met with resistance from these white suburbanites, which I really love the focus and honing in on the fact that, so many times like the racist is pictured as somebody who doesn't speak good English, is very country, is very southern, and this is more like no, suburban white people are just as racist and just as violent too. They're just as nasty as the ones that they make fun of who are lower class, who are look dirty and seedy, and they have their two front teeth missing, and they talk like this and they talk like that, and they wear overalls, and the stereotypical white racist portrayal, and that's not what white racism looks like. Yeah, that's one version of it, but it also looks like people in their Sunday best, white people going to church on Sundays, and their white picket fences and the white picket fence houses, and their cookie cutter houses with the two dogs and the two kids and their wives and the nice corporate jobs and all this other stuff. It also looks like that as well. And I really love how Misha Green focuses in on these white suburbanites and how they are just as violent, they are just as racist, they are just as nasty as the ones that they try to, as the white people they try to portray, the lower class white people that live in the South, that they try to portray these sort of country backwards, country bumpkin rednecks. They try to portray as being unkempt, unruly, violent, and all this other stuff. Yeah, they can be that way, but also you are too. What up, everybody? It is your boy Jabbar back again with a video. Welcome back to my channel for another installment of Lovecraft Country. I have been doing reviews of Lovecraft Country for the past 2 weeks now. So I'll put those other reviews in the description box below. So go check those out. I usually post these on Sundays right before the next episode comes on. So this will be posted actually tomorrow because today's Saturday. I'm doing this a little late. This third installment of Lovecraft Country. The episode is called Holy Ghost. I actually want to do my review a little bit differently this time and go by character base. I usually go by plot points, usually going by jumping all around and going by the plot points that I find interesting and going based off of that. This time I actually want to go and talk about the characters, particularly the black female characters. I feel like this was their episode. Holy Ghost was their episode. We even entered the episode, with Letitia sitting in a church and watching, the women do the praise dance. So we already opened this episode with like this sort of celebration, or black women being very expressive. Also, another black woman watching these black women be expressive. And this episode really seems to focus in and hone in on Letitia and Hippolyta, and really grounding them and how they're going to be important as the story goes along. It really felt like they were I want to say side pieces. They were just sort of afterthoughts, and they were just sort of there along for the ride. It just felt like Anjanou Ellis's character, Hippolyta, was just sort of there as Uncle George's wife. It feels like this episode is more sort of grounding her in actually she's going to become a very important character as we sort of move along in the story, that's going to sort of push the plot along. Also, it feels like Letitia is going to be, seems to be being more grounded, and why she's going to be important moving forward in terms of being an influential character and pushing the plot along, and actually being, influential in terms of pushing the plot along and actually having some importance other than just sort of being Tick's old friend from high school. It really didn't focus on Tick too much or the other male characters too much. It's sort of like we're taking a break after Uncle George sort of passes away. We do enter this episode understanding that Uncle George, it's been about 3 weeks since they buried Uncle George, so some time has passed. Sort of see Hippolyta, Diana, her daughter Diana, and Tick sort of, they're going through their daily routine, sort of being quiet. Hippolyta, you can just see on her face that she's very uncomfortable with Tick being there. She's very still heartbroken and still very upset from the fact that her husband died. She also feels like people aren't telling her the truth. Like I said before in the last episode, when I did the last review, I felt like when I saw the trailer for the next episode, it felt like Hippolyta was not, she wasn't falling for the bullshit. Like, she doesn't really believe, she does not really believe that Uncle George, she feels like there's something missing. Like, it makes sense. Like, the story that they told her was essentially that they ran into some trouble with some of the sheriffs along the road, which we all know is not true. We all know Uncle George, died in the Braithwaite house from suffering from a gunshot wound. They also can't tell the story about how, the sheriff really died, which is that he got eaten by these sort of vampire dogs. I'm gonna continue to call them vampire dogs until somebody corrects me on the name of what these creatures that their names actually are. I'm pretty sure they have some probably Lovecraftian name that he gave them before, but I'm gonna continue to call them vampire doll. She's not falling for the BS. She's like, oh, these niggas are cap. We see her in the morning. Tick is trying to help out around the house, so she's just very annoyed with everything that he does. Tick doesn't really remind, and nothing that he's doing is sort of living up to the expectation or living up to sort of um, just the role model and person that her husband was, that Uncle George was. He's doing everything wrong. He's cooking the eggs wrong. He's washing the dishes wrong. I see, Tick call her down for breakfast. She says she'll be a minute, and she's holding a book of Dracula. In episode 1, there's a mention of like Uncle George's favorite book was Dracula. He even talks about it when they're sort of being attacked by the vampire dogs. If he remembers correctly, about vampires and their mythology from the book Dracula. So I love how these little interesting sort of details are coming back and circling back around within every episode. So she's holding Uncle George's book and she starts to look at it. She's looking in the mirror. He starts to like just rip out the pages, which is really unsettling. And I don't know if she feels betrayed in some way, like this is all bullshit and I've been betrayed, or she feels like maybe Uncle George betrayed her by leaving her. If I remember correctly, he promised her on the phone that he was going to take her out on the next run. And so maybe she feels betrayed. It's common for people to feel betrayed, for people leaving them when they die. So maybe that's what that's supposed to symbolize without actually having to speak it and talk it. I'm glad that a lot of things in this episode, because last episode with the Braithwaites felt more talky. It felt very talky. And not that I don't like that, but I really appreciate when silence and things can be given to the audience through silence and through just character emotions and interactions and behaviors. He's ripping up this like fantasy, so maybe it's like this, I don't really believe in this stuff anymore. I don't really believe in this sort of like visions that he had, like these sort of like the visionary that he was. Tick and Montrose have a conversation about how maybe they should tell her a different story, or she's just not believing it and she's not there. And then Montrose with him getting into this kind of fight and argument. Montrose essentially yelling at, his son or his supposed son. We don't know yet. We actually, in that moment when he goes back into his father's house, he sees a picture of his mother, who was also the vision that she was in the last episode with the Braithwaites when Uncle George was in that room. I made the assumption, and I had the theory that the woman that Uncle George sees when he's under that spell in his room is, Tick's mother, and that possibly they had an entanglement and they had some type of romance together. And it turns out that that was his mother, and so they did know each other and they clearly did have an entanglement. Well, I think that Tick is really Uncle George's, or at least that might come out. But we see a picture of his mother. I'm glad that that is not spoken either, that we get to see that, him look at the picture of his mother as he comes back into the house. That relates back to seeing that same woman in Uncle George's room, and they're dancing lovingly and talking all these sweet nothings into each other's ear and all that good stuff, just to let them know that they had a relationship before I guess he met his wife. It also feels like, I don't know if Hippolyta knows, but it feels like she's more than just disgusted with Tick because of, it feels like more than just he's doing stuff wrong and that he might be not telling the whole truth. It feels like there's a little bit of resentment towards Tick, a lot of resentment towards Tick. And it just feels like she's disgusted to even look at him and even have him around. So I'm wondering if like Uncle George was with Hippolyta and Tick's mother at the same time, and that she knows that he is a love child and she was okay with it, but now that he's gone, she's like left with a tick in the house. Now she has to think about it. I don't know. It felt like there was a little underlying tension. We get Hippolyta also in the house when Lady Letitia is having her little housewarming party. She goes looking for Diana, her daughter. Diana is actually playing down in the basement with some other kids with a Ouija board. It was funny because I saw the memes on Twitter talking about, now this is a little bit unrealistic because no black kids are gonna be playing with Ouija boards, which I don't know if that's like a fair assessment or not. Black kids, I guess, can play with Ouija boards too. There's two boys and two girls. With Diana, another girl, and there's two boys, and it felt like, so they keep asking the Ouija board questions, and of course they're pushing it along or whatever. It's clear that they're pushing it, but then the lights flicker a little bit, and then after that, the boy asks a question. So one of the boys asks a question. He says, "Am I going to have a good time on my trip down south?" If you remember the story of Emmett Till, he travels down south. His mother sends him down south to like to visit some family. Of course, he ends up getting killed. So the Ouija board, after the lights flicker and he asks that question, it goes and it moves towards no, and he looks a little bit like, what does that mean? I don't know what that does for the story. I don't know what that exactly does for moving the story along. But I mean, it's interesting. This does take place in Chicago. Anna ends up asking a question. So this is after the lights flicker as well. And she ends up asking a question about whether or not is somebody here with them. And it says yes, of course. And then it spells out George Freeman. The Ouija board starts spelling out George Freeman. And she thinks that the kids are pushing the pointer, but they're not. They're all like, we didn't push it, we didn't push it, we didn't push it. And that's also when we go back up, we get the camera pans back upstairs to Hippolyta looking for Diana and looking for Dee. And she sort of gets this also like poltergeist, ghostly, spiritual interaction. Something happens. She hears something, and she's like, "Who's there?" She turns around, and a door to some room starts opening up by itself, and she walks in, and it's like this contraption, like this device, and it seems like it's a replica of the solar system, and she's just sort of amazed, and she's just sort of looking, just sort of in awe at it. I don't know how that's going to play into, it feels like Uncle George, after we get that scene of Diana, if Uncle George is spiritually still connected or tethered to this world, which I'm assuming that he is, I think Uncle George is actually probably going to come back. But we also see when Hippolyta is talking to Montrose and she's trying to get more answers about what happened during that, when they were on their ride through the countryside, going towards, I forget where it is, Massachusetts, I think it was. She's sort of grilling Montrose about what happened, but he's not breaking. He's like, I don't know what you want me to tell me. I don't know what else there could be. He's trying to protect her from what happened, trying to put it all behind him. I see something run across the window or something like that. And I don't know if anybody else caught that, but something runs across the window. I don't know if it's a spirit. It felt like a spirit. I don't know what it is, but it felt like something that's going to come up later on in the later episodes. I don't even know if Hippolyta and Dee will even make an appearance in the fourth episode, or if they'll have a really big story in the fourth episode, but I feel like this was a setup for something that's coming on later down the road. Getting into Letitia, because this seems to be the main black female character in this. The main black female focus in this is Letitia. So Letitia ends up buying a house. How she got the money, we don't know yet. But she goes to her sister Ruby, and she's essentially like the one that doesn't like her like that, doesn't really fuck with her like that. And she's like, I want us to become sisters again. Please move in with me. You can stay here rent free and all this other stuff. I bought this house. It's on the white side of town. Ruby starts going into how, the last black people that moved into that neighborhood, essentially they got attacked and all this other stuff, and they got run out, and the house got burnt down and all that, which of course is foreshadowing for what possibly could happen to them as well. After some, coaxing and convincing that they're going to move in together, and they're going to throw a housewarming party. She's also going to move some of her artist friends into the house as well. We immediately see when Letitia and her sister Ruby and some of her artist friends move into the house that they are met with resistance from these white suburbanites, which I really love the focus and honing in on the fact that, so many times like the racist is pictured as somebody who doesn't speak good good English, is very country, is very southern. And this is more like, no, suburban white people are just as racist and just as violent too. They're just as nasty as the ones that they make fun of, who are lower class, who are look dirty and seedy, and they have their two front teeth missing, and they talk like this and they talk like that, and they wear overalls, and you know the stereotypical white racist portrayal, and that's not what white racism looks like. Yeah, that's one version of it, but it also looks like people in their Sunday best, white people going to church on Sundays, and their white picket fences and the white picket fence houses, and their cookie cutter houses with the two dogs and the two kids and their wives and nice corporate jobs and all this other stuff. It also looks like that as well. And I really love how Misha Green focuses in on these white suburbanites and how they are just as violent, they are just as racist, they are just as nasty as the ones that as the white people they try to portray, the lower class white people that live in the South, that they try to portray these sort of country backwards, country bumpkin rednecks. They try to portray as being unkempt, unruly, violent, and all this other stuff. Yeah, they can be that way, but also you are too. White neighbors, park their cars outside of their houses, and they put bricks over the horns on the steering wheel so that it constantly is like honking, so that the cars are constantly honking outside of their houses. And so they're trying to make it so unbearable so that they'll actually leave and just get tired and leave. So this is the first wave of violence that we get. Of course, this doesn't work. Letitia is very stubborn and hard-headed and she's not gonna move. She doesn't care. She's like, okay, whatever, fine. And like they get so annoyed because the white people get so annoyed and upset because it's not working. They actually end up having a party. Like it does, like even the cars are still outside, parked outside, honking and everything. But they're like, fuck it. Is this ghost playing with her sheets and trying to I guess the ghosts are really they're black ghosts. Which I also like this idea of black ghosts. Paul Mooney has a joke talking about how he doesn't like ghost stories and ghost movies because he feels like they're racist. He's like, the ghosts don't exist. His joke is essentially that he doesn't believe that ghosts exist because none of the ghosts he ever hears about are black. You telling me that no black slave ghosts ever existed and wanted to come back and haunt white people? That only white ghosts exist to come back and haunt people? Like, this shit isn't real. This shit is fake. Misha Green gives us some black ghosts, and we see this black woman sitting by. Well, like creepily, her mouth is half open, like bloodied, and it's hanging off of her face, and she's looking at Letitia on the corner of her bed. Letitia, of course, is pulling back the sheets, and finally the ghost rips them off. I guess the whole time the ghosts are really trying to warn Letitia about what's, in the house and the danger that's in the house, and the danger is a white ghost, a white man. Letitia's like, fuck it, if they're gonna be this, nasty and vindictive and put cars outside of my house, I'm just gonna throw a party, fight all my black friends and black neighbors at this party. The black friends are kind of all talking about how everybody seems to be talking about all these different types of racial things going on and stuff happening with different black people. One conversation is about this black guy who went off and married a white woman, and they're having a debate on whether he can be pro-black and still be married to somebody of the opposite race. And Letitia makes a little remark saying, I guess he can still be pro-black, I guess. You see Ruby having a conversation. Ruby seems to come off really uppity sometimes to me. Like, she seems to come off real respectability politics wise. She's having a conversation about how what black people need to do with themselves and how they need to act and what they need to be doing. She's kind of like, I'm trying to get a job at Marshall's. I'm trying to get a job at Marshall's to make something of myself, and black people, if we would actually put more focus into this, we could actually get somewhere. And I kind of roll my eyes every time Ruby sort of makes a very respectability politics remark about something. She also makes a remark to Letitia about how she really seems to despise Letitia's artist friends, and wow, I don't know how you brought these people up in here and all this other stuff. They don't do nothing but make art or something like that. And I'm just like, what? I'm just like, what? Like the respectability politics, the looking down her nose at certain black people who aren't respectable and don't have respectable professions. It really kind of turned me off towards her as a character. Like I'm just really not feeling Ruby and her respectability politics. That doesn't mean that like Letitia is like all good and all great and everything. Because also in that moment, she's also telling reveals that she got the money from her mother. Like her mother left her some cash, ended up leaving her some cash, and that's how she bought this house. And that her mother only left her the cash and not give any to Ruby or her brother, who were pretty much there when she died and helped her, in her old age when Letitia just sort of ran off and did her own thing. And instead of like sharing the money, she just kept it all to herself and bought this house. And Ruby mentions that Letitia is selfish, which she is. That is a very selfish move. Even if your mother was a horrible woman and she left only you, the child that she really didn't seem to like that much money, you think you would still share it with your brothers and sisters. Even if your mother was horrible and not thinking about them, you would still split the money with them. Going back to the party, this whole time, like Jonathan Major's character Tick and Journey Smollett Bell's character Letitia, they've been eyeing each other for a minute. This entire episode they've been like, but Tick seems to be like wary about like getting involved and getting in a relationship. Tick doesn't seem to really want to make a move until he hears this other black guy talked about how, is Letitia, do you and Letitia have anything going on? That's because he's staying there rent free. And he's just wondering because he wants to know if he still has a shot with her, because they used to sort of mess around back in the day when they were in high school. She got around and all this really gossipy type of talk that niggas be doing. It's not until then that I think Tick gets jealous or whatever. Not only of that guy sort of making comments about how he used to roll around in the hay with Letitia, but also the guy that Letitia is also dancing with very sexually. They're like bumping and grinding on the dance floor. It's pretty much the pelvis movements. And Letitia's looking dead at Tick like, what you gonna do about it? Or he corners her in the bathroom, and which I guess she kind of wanted, and then they have sex on the sink. And then it turns out that she gets, kind of, I guess, she says that she didn't realize she was on her period because he lifts up his hand, there's some blood on it, and he's like, well, it's okay. And he says, I'll see you downstairs. So it's just kind of very like a quick, I don't want to say a quick 1-2 pumps. Very quick. And then he just sort of goes downstairs. They have the little fling. And then she ends up crying. And I'm like, oh, shit. Like, well, why is she crying? And it also seemed very weird to me. I was like, she didn't know she was on her period. That doesn't sound very likely, but okay. And then it found out, because I don't know, even if I guess you can, you can fuck a period on, but, you would still know that you had the possibility of like, I don't want to get, and then it turns out later that actually she was actually a virgin. That was the first time she ever had sex, so he kind of popped her cherry. So all those rumors and all that, messaging that we get about Letitia is just not true. This whole idea that she might be a loose woman, we're sort of confronted with that idea. But now to the brunt of the story. So a lot of stuff goes on at the house. Letitia has a lot of like, the typical ghost things, stuff moving around, things coming alive. There's a moment where Letitia, she takes her photos to be, and from the party to be, developed, and down in the basement. And there's all these scratches and marks on the pictures, and she takes them and she puts them all on the floor, trying to sort of connect the dots of where all these scratches are coming from. And this like big head comes out of the pictures, and it's like this white man, and he's like, "Get out of my head!" And Letitia runs upstairs and she goes against Tick, and they come down and they look, and there's nothing there, of course, and she swears like there's something weird going on with this house. We see, of course, the ghost standing in the background as Tick and Letitia are having sex. Then after the white neighbors sort of put a cross and burn it in their yard, you can see some of the white boys running away after they burn the cross in the yard. Letitia goes outside, she gets a bat. The other guys all get, their shotguns, and she goes around busting up the white people's cars. and she, essentially puts an end to this whole honking thing with the bricks in the cars, and then they wait for the police to come and take them away. I really love that scene. This is also the scene after Tick and Letitia have had sex, and she goes out there, and it's like the men are kind of following her lead. And she goes out there, she busts up the cars. I think I saw Misha Green post that Beyonce's Lemonade was supposed to be playing during this moment, but I'm so glad they went with the like, we're gonna bust this devil out, the church music instead. I'm so glad they went with that instead, because I just feel like Beyonce's Lemonade would be very, first of all, I don't think it's appropriate. Like I said before, I think the mixing the contemporary music with these sort of period pieces that are set 60, 70 years in the past, like it just doesn't seem appropriate. I really enjoyed the gospel music of like, oh, we're gonna bust this devil out, and it's supposed to be like racism. I really love that juxtaposition that's going on there. After, she busts out the windows in these white people's cars and they've sat out in front of her house, they wait for the police to come and they put their hands up, and everything, and they get taken into, she gets taken into a car, one of the police cars, the police trucks. And then also that scene reminded me, when she's in the police car, it reminded me of Freddie Gray. I don't know if anybody remembers what happened to Freddie Gray, but Freddie Gray essentially was taken in the back of a police car, and he was, handcuffed, and they sort of whipped the car all around, so that, he essentially ended up breaking, and his spine ended up being broken in like 26 different places, and he was paralyzed, and he later died in the hospital. They just sort of dumped his body on a gurney in the hospital and left him there to die. And in that scene with Letitia, they kind of do the same type of tactics. So police have been doing the same type of tactics for a very long time now. This is nothing new. Nothing that happened to Freddie Gray is nothing new. They put her in the back of the police car. They question her about the white policeman, questions her about the house. As they are whipping the car around, he gets to hold on, of course, to the little strap, so that he can keep his balance. But they whip the car around, and they have her whip back and forth and hit her face and her body against this very hard metal and the seats and everything like that, sort of like a form of torture. And he's sort of asking her these questions, and that sort of led Letitia, because he's asking these very weird questions about has she noticed anything going on in the house. Of course she has. She's noticed these ghosts in her house, or these spiritual whatever things she's going on in her house. And so that leads her to figure out the connection between not only that police officer, but also who had the house before her, and what happened to the house and how it burned down. She goes on to find out that, there is this guy named Winthrop or somebody, or whatever his name was, that owned the house before him, that she thinks that he was doing illegal experimentation with the black people, that I guess the cop was providing him with. So we get into black experimentation. We talk about this all the time with, even the study of gynecology was black women being tested. The syphilis, the Tuskegee Syphilis Project, where black men were injected with syphilis. So we're getting into Agent Orange and all that other stuff. We're getting into black people being experimented on. The historical significance of black people being constantly experimented on. They also deal with some of that in Black Lightning as well, the experimentation of black people. They do it more so with the drugs and testing out drugs and stuff on black communities. But I really liked how it's sort of added into this, series here, and that Letitia thinks that a lot of the ghosts in her house, she thinks that the guy down in their house that she saw with the photos was the guy Winthrop, and then the other ghosts are the black ghosts, and it turns out to be right. Her and Chick go and get like this soothsayer, this hoodoo woman. She brings a goat and she cuts the goat's neck on the front porch. These white boys are watching from across the street, and they're just like, oh, I can't believe they're bringing that black magic over into our house, over into our neighborhoods. And so, of course, while they're doing this whole, cleansing and trying to figure out this whole sort of seance of the house, of course, these white boys walk their ass up in the house, and they get killed by the ghost, the black ghost, which I'm so happy for. They walk into somebody else's house. They walk into somebody else's house with bats, going to go beat up on somebody, thinking they're going to go beat up on somebody, and they get attacked by these black ghosts. And I was like, this was the first time I ever wanted a ghost to beat somebody up and kill somebody so badly. I was like, please get these white boys up out of here. Please get them the fuck up out of here. Please kill them in the worst possible way. First of all, you see somebody cut open a goat's head on their front porch. Why don't you go back in your house and mind your business? Why are you going to somebody else's house trying to go beat them up? For what? For what reason? Because you're just racist. And these little suburbanite white boys, they're just as racist as everybody else. And their own racism again. Like I've been talking about this for like 2 episodes now. White people's racism in these episodes are getting them killed. We start with the sheriff in the first episode. He gets killed because he instead refuses to empathize with, he instead refuses to empathize with the black character, so he gets eaten. We get the white woman who is like, she's lower class on the totem pole in this Order of Ancient Dawn. She ends up getting knocked the fuck out. I mean, these white people their racism gets in their own way, and I love that Misha Green is really putting that. It seems to be a common theme throughout this entire season, is that racism not only is detrimental to black people, but it's also detrimental to your own well-being as well, that you were so fucking racist that you will put yourself in harm's way just so you can beat up on niggas, or just so you can, like these white boys. Why would you go into somebody? You saw her cut open a whole goat of a head of a goat. You saw her cut open a head of a goat. Leave these black people. If I saw somebody cut a goat head, I'd be like, oh, ain't none of my business. They want to go in the house because they are so upset that these black people will not leave no matter what they do. They will not leave the neighborhood. Also, I guess they think they're bringing black magic up into the place. And so they will not leave. And so they just decide, we're going to go make them leave. We're going to go beat them up and make them leave. And these ghosts tear their ass up. They tear their ass up. And I was so happy to see it. One guy gets burned. One guy gets his head chopped off. Yes, thank you. Get your head chopped off. Anyway, they go on with the seance. Of course, the white guy, Winthrop, comes out. The white guy that was doing the experimentation on all these black people that he killed in his house. He comes out. He's like, get out of my house. Get out of my house. He possesses the lady, the hoodoo lady, and he's flinging them around. Then he possesses Tick. And so then Tick starts going after Journey. Tick starts going after Letitia. Journey is the real actress. She's playing Letitia. Goes after Letitia, and Letitia calls on these sort of black ancestral ghosts who have been killed by Winthrop to like take her hand and hold her hand. We see these, we see the experimentation that he did on them at first. He put a baby's head on this athlete. He, ended up that woman with the mouth that is like sort of hanging off. She comes. We also see another woman. She's holding her dead fetus because I guess he in the experimentation not only killed her but also her child. She was a pregnant woman. We see a man with his head cut off. We see all of these different, we get to see the experimentation that he did on these black people and the horrific things that were done to them. And then they turn as they start to hold Letitia's hand, as they start to chant, for Winthrop to be banished and get out and die and move on, essentially, and be sort of, I guess, slayed, or, I don't know what you want to call it, an exorcism. But they're all sort of chanting, and they sort of turn back into their normal selves. We get to see their normal selves and who they were before the experimentation, which I also love that visually. I thought it was very powerful. I thought it was very empowering, calling on the ancestors. Again, this idea of calling on the ancestors. We got that last episode when we see, Tick's great-great-great-great-great-grandmother lead him out of harm's way, from the house collapsing, and she leads him on the path that she took when she made it out of the house alive, pregnant. Again, calling on the ancestors to come and help you sort of defeat racism. So Tick at the end of this episode has this inkling that this white woman, Christina, who he didn't see die, like I said before, I always thought that Christina was gonna come back. Christina has been behind this whole thing. She's been planning it out just like white women do. She put all the pieces in a row so she could set herself up to be the most powerful wizard, witch, whatever she wants to be. I don't exactly know what Christina's plans are, exactly what she wants to do. I feel like that's coming later on. But we sort of get confirmation in this episode, at the end of this episode, when Tick meets her and Tick pulls out a gun on her. Of course, essentially, it wasn't gonna work. I mean, this is a woman who can who can say, essentially, do spells and magic without even having to say anything. And sort of Tick freezes up, his arm tenses up, he becomes paralyzed. Essentially, he can't move as he pulls the gun out on her. He's like, and she's like, now you're gonna listen to my history lesson. So Tick essentially says that he also saw the name Winthrop when he was looking through the house in the Braithwaite house. He saw the name Winthrop, and he got this just intuitive feeling that essentially Christina was behind all of this, and that they were behind all of this stuff, all of these weird occurrences, and also Letitia getting that house. It turns out that Christina actually sent Letitia that whole message about how her mother had left her some money when her mother actually didn't have any mother. She died broke, she died poor. She actually sent her the money to sort of set her up to go and get that house. So Christina set up Letitia to even come back and be a part of Tick's life. Now, why she sent Letitia the money so that she could come back and be in that house and so that her and Tick could get back together, somehow Letitia fits into this narrative and this story somehow, some way, but we don't know yet. So for some reason, Christina feels like Letitia is going to be influential and important to also helping Tick do something for her. I think that's going to come tomorrow in the next episode. But she essentially breaks down the fact that, you know, this guy named, I think it was Winthrop, he went and he ended up, the guy who owned the house, he went and he stole some of the pages from her father's book, actually her grandfather's book as well. Her grandfather, Braithwaite, ended up, you know, he had this whole book of spells that, you know, most witches or wizards, you know, they only get one spell in their lifetime, if that, you know, that they create, that they make up on their own. And that, you know, her father's claim to fame was the fact of immortality, the fact that he found a way, he created a protection spell around himself, that was his claim to fame, that he sort of provided immortality for all of the ancient order of the Dawn and also himself, but that he needed to lower that protection spell of immortality from around himself in order to access the Garden of Eden. And so she felt that that was her perfect opportunity to not only kill his ass, but also get him out of the way, which she used essentially Tick to do, which is why she even, you know, went and got his father so that, you know, Tick could come and so that she could, you know, get her father out of the way so that she could be the most powerful wizard and witch in all of the land or whatever. The Winthrop guy ended up stealing pages from her great-grandfather's book with all of these books of spells, that those pages, that not only is the book now lost, but those pages are now lost, and she feels like those pages could be, you know, that combining those pages together, you know, the possibilities of what she could do with that power. And so the Winthrop guy, he ended up taking the pages, stealing them, and trying to create his own spells from those stolen pages. That's how he got the house. He went and bought the house. The guy Epstein, who was a follower of Winthrop, ended up doing the experimentations on black people for centuries. They were doing experimentations on black people for not centuries, but forever, and trying to sort of create their own spells. That's how those black people even got in those positions and in those physical states that they were in, because they were performing spells on them. It wasn't necessarily experimentation. Well, it was in a way, but it was magical experimentation. So we're getting science mixed with magic, the cosmic horror genre going on and on and on. And that she plans to sort of figure out where the missing book is of her great-grandfather and also where the missing pages are, and that she led Letitia and Tick to that house to sort of figure out what was going on. That this is all Christina's doing. This is all Christina's doing, as she wants all the power for herself, and that she plans to use Letitia and Tick to find it. Now, why she wants these two people, why they are necessarily important for her to do this, why she couldn't just get her father out of the way by herself, I don't know, but she is very conniving, also very powerful. If she can just say a spell or do a spell and do magic without even thinking about it, very powerful. It seems like in the next episode, that Letitia and Tick are going to go on an adventure to try and figure out and find these books and find these missing pages as well. I feel like every episode at this point has almost been like a season finale. And I feel like it's being done like this because we're only going to get one season. So every episode is being treated like a season finale in a way, like we're being left with a cliffhanger, but it's not ending. Let me know what you think was going to happen next. Let me know some of your theories about what also I might have missed in this episode as well. I will see you guys next time for the next video.